Beside a quiet lakeshore at night, our main guy, Sora Fujimiya, reaches down with both hands to place sticks of firewood into a crackling campfire, while a modest pot of soup bubbles rhythmically above the heat. Sitting cross-legged on the grassy terrain, he stirs the meal with a long wooden stick, muttering, "It's already dark out," as his tiny, round, floating companion, Seal, hovers beside him and watches the pot, while glowing white orbs drift through the sky like slow-falling stars. The narrator dramatic posts about what the boy and spirit seek on this journey, prompting Sora to pause his work and gaze upward with wide eyes reflecting the floaty light show. Across the vast night vista, rugged, snow-capped mountains stand over the mirror-still lake, while ethereal orbs hover over field flowers, one landing gently upon a bloom. Sora sits on the grassy bank with his back to us, watching the display, alongside floating Ciel, before softly confessing, "Ciel, I don't care about being a hero at all." Sora lowers his gaze, his expression turning somber, before the world around him suddenly shifts into a borderless starry dream space, where he floats amidst weightless cooking pots, while declaring, "Travel as far as my feet can take me," spreading his arms with a hopeful look and declaring his true Chad desire. "I want to walk through this wondrous world." Cut back to reality, where Sora staggers into the boisterous town tavern, strapped to an impossibly gigantic wooden luggage frame that rattles like a moving house. Out on the cobblestone streets of the unknown city, Sora's already running a low-tier delivery speedrun to survive, smiling at his fluffy companion while recalling his weird arrival in this different world. He lugs massive stacks of wooden crates through town, grinding odd jobs like a true level 1 scrub as he struggles up steep, pre-modern stone stairs to deliver packages to sweet old ladies on the sidewalk. It's a medieval drag with 0 cars in sight. But Sora stands by a stack of crates later, realizing his comfy life here is built on a single bizarre exploit. He takes a firm step with his leather boot, triggering the passive walking skill that prevents fatigue. But fatigue immunity doesn't stop hunger, and his eyes lock onto a nearby food stall like a heat-seeking missile. He slides over to a beefy vendor named Pops, ordering 2 meat skewers, and happily walks away with a free bonus skewer while Ciel desperately warns him about the heat. The greedy little puffball floats way too close to the meat, causing Sora to jump back in a high-ping panic. Too late? Savory sauce splatters all over his pristine white coat, forcing him to immediately cast cleaning magic to vaporize the stains in a mini vortex. Suddenly, a short-haired girl in armor shouts his name from across the street, waving frantically alongside a twin-tailed mage who is eyeing his food. Sora's eye suddenly widens, distracted, as he pushes a supply cart, and the girls call him out for staring blankly at the massive royal castle in the distance. He rubs his head with a sheepish laugh, trying to play it cool, while his mind is forcibly dragged back to the massive stone fortress where he was summoned exactly 1 month ago. Back then, the majestic castle spires towered over the mountains, while the royal tyrant sat smugly on his gilded throne. Below him, 7 high schoolers stood inside a glowing magic circle, including Sora, who was still wearing his school uniform and looking totally disoriented in the grand hall. He'd been riding a cramped commuter train just a second before, when a sudden flash of light teleported him to this kingdom of Alesia, where the ruler declared them all legendary heroes, before instantly demanding they slay a terrifying resurrected demon king. Flashback to the grand royal throne room of Alesia, where the king sits on his ornate throne, looking down at 7 high school kids standing inside a glowing magic summoning circle. The king welcomes them as the 7 heroes, while Sora stands in his uniform looking completely lost and asking, "Where am I?" He fondly remembers riding a crowded train to his high school entrance ceremony before a flashbang lit up the train car and kidnapped him across dimensions. The king formally introduces the kingdom of Alacia, boasting that he summoned all these brave heroes specifically to go suicide run the resurrected Demon King. Sora panics like a sane person, shouting, "What are you suddenly talking about?" But the monarch waves off his existential crisis and points everyone toward a big glowing crystal ball. The king picks generic protagonist Shun Minase to go first, and as soon as Shun touches the orb, a holographic status UI window pops up. Shun unlocks the legendary Sword King job class, prompting Sora to gush over how epic and game-like it is, praising the RPG gods, while the king smirks like a gacha game developer. The monarch gives a typical exposition dump about status panels and how summoned heroes get broken stats to beat the final boss. The king feeds the teenagers toxic positivity about being special chosen ones, saying they were chosen for this, leaving Shun utterly bewildered. The rest of the teenage squad gets hyper-hyped. A dark-haired girl and a casual-clothes kid scramble to get their class turns. The assembly line continues as the group stands before the king. The spiky girl pulls Sorcerer King. The dark-haired girl gets Saint. Bob-cut glasses girl becomes Spirit Mage. Suit Lady hits Paladin. And Eye Patch Blonde pulls Master Swordsman. The whole hall erupts into cheers, with Sora hyping up his classmates like a supportive cheerleader. The king gestures enthusiastically and roars with laughter, declaring the summoning an absolute success before explaining the basic UI chant, status open. Still standing before the grand throne room's royal dais, the king's face turns completely cold as he instantly ignores the trash tier recruit, laughing arrogantly while leading the other 6 chosen heroes off to a welcome banquet. He casually drops the quest details. Defeat the Demon King to get your portal home, before offering a fake, sugary welcome to the elite squad. Sora stands alone, sweating bullets and feeling incredibly uneasy as the main party leaves him behind. Suddenly, a fully armored knight marches up, staring him down before ordering him to follow and escorting him straight out of the palace. Boom. Smash cut to a horse-drawn carriage speeding down the narrow cobbled streets, past timber-framed fantasy houses, with the driver whipping the horses when the side door suddenly flies open and Sora is violently launched out like trash. He face plants onto the hard cobblestones, tumbling and rolling like a rag doll before sliding to a halt on his back. He pushes himself up in front of the massive castle gates just as they slam shut with an echoing crash, locking him out of the main quest forever. Sora screams at the top of his lungs in pure, unadulterated rage before grabbing a small pouch that was tossed out with him, only to find a pathetic compensation package of 2 silver and 10 copper coins. Stranded in the middle of a massive, bustling medieval street, his eyes spark with a momentary sense of wonder at the sprawling cityscape and the gorgeous brick architecture. He watches a crowd of weirdly dressed local NPCs and realizes with absolute awe that he is living inside a literal video game. But his joy is short-lived when the locals start staring at him like he's a freak, causing him to collapse to his knees before he scrambles up, screams an apology, and bolts down the street, away from the guards. Recognizing his school uniform is basically a giant beacon for trolls, he ducks into a shaded alleyway, sliding down a brick wall to pant in exhaustion. Sitting in the deep shadows, he laments his tragic fate before screaming at the walls about how unfair it is to be thrown out like garbage. Calming down, he decides to check his stats, whispering, "Status open," to summon the glowing digital menu. He leans forward to inspect the data and spots an experience counter showing his walking skill gives him exactly 1 EXP for every step he takes. In his mind, a chibi vision shows he's already racked up 996 steps just from his panic sprint. Before he can calculate this broken passive, a delicious aroma wafts over, making him imagine a massive feast right before his stomach lets out a thunderous growl. and he moans in starvation. Suddenly, a loud rustle behind him reveals a massive, terrifyingly muscular street vendor looming in the shadows. The giant glares down, making Sora sweat in terror. As he screams an apology and presses his back to the wall, the giant lunges forward, but instead of a beatdown, he shoves a hot, sizzling meat skewer directly into Sora's face. Sora blinks in shock as the vendor, Pops, tells him to eat up for free. Overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness, Sora insists on paying and dumps his entire coin stash onto the counter. Pops looks at the pile in confusion, while Sora bows frantically, offering to work off any debt. Pops laughs, telling him he's actually overpaying and explaining the exchange rate of how copper and silver coins work, and that a skewer only costs 1 copper and 8 regular coins. He leans over to give the kid some street-smart advice, and Sora bows in deep gratitude. He walks back toward the main street in his school shoes, but stops instantly as a digital notification pings in his brain. A translucent status screen pops up. He has leveled up and gained a skill point, revealing a list of learnable skills like night vision and healing magic. Pops asks what's up, causing Sora to flinch and frantically wave his hands to hide the private UI. He immediately dumps his point into the appraisal skill, gasping in awe as the power activates, and reveals that his cheap snack is actually high-quality skewered wolf meat. He grins, realizing this walking exploit is going to turn him into an absolute god. Right there in the open marketplace, Pops grins, asking if the kid is speechless over the quality. Sora ignores his earlier wolf meat concerns and takes a massive, greedy bite, instantly ascending into pure gastronomic bliss. He cheers at how delicious it is, crying over the juicy texture, and embarking on a wild, passionate rant about the spices dancing in his mouth, before bowing sheepishly for over-explaining the flavor profile. Pops lets out a boisterous laugh, highly impressed that this random kid has a MasterChef palate, and asks for his name. Sora introduces himself, and Pops immediately offers to take him under his wing, leaving the kid wide-eyed with relief. A short while later, Sora is strolling the sunny streets, looking far less suspicious wrapped in an oversized mantle Pops lent him to hide his school uniform. He recalls the street vendor pointing him toward a local gear shop and realizes that his passive/walking skill has completely eliminated his physical fatigue. He reaches a charming brick building, but since he can't read the fantasy font on the sign, his UI translates it to garment shop, leaving him wondering if he's the only one playing with mods. A friendly tailoress invites him in, and after standing stiffly for an hour of measurements, Sora emerges looking like a high-tier RPG protagonist in an elegant white adventurer's coat. Even better, the tailoress offers to buy his weird school blazer for a whopping 3 gold coins, sending him out the door in a daze, having literally made a net profit on a wardrobe upgrade. Returning to the marketplace of tiled-roofed houses, Pops notes his glow-up, and Sora hands back the mantle with thanks. Eager to repay the favor, Sora insists on helping out, until Pops finally relents. He hands Sora a delivery package of meat to take over a nearby knoll to an innkeeper named Ollie, which Sora gladly accepts as a perfect fetch quest. But before he can leave, Pops starts stacking an absolute mountain of survival gear on him. A frying pan, a tent, a massive backpack, binoculars, a boomerang, and a security bell. Sora stands dwarfed by this towering pile, stammering in protest, but then remembers his broken fatigue exploit and gets a look of pure determination. "I'm fine," he declares to a shocked Pops. At first, his spine buckles under the immense physical weight, and Pops warns him to stop before he snaps in half. But the second Sora plants his boot and takes a step, his posture straightens up perfectly, leaving Pop's eye wide in absolute disbelief. Thanks to his skill, the entire load feels completely weightless as long as he stays in motion. He waves goodbye and marches away, leaving the vendor utterly dumbfounded. Leaving the market behind, Sora approaches the base of the climb, realizing that in this world, a simple knoll is actually a towering, jagged mountain. He plants his boot on the rough terrain, feeling zero weight as he effortlessly scales a steep rock face with a confident, fatigue-free smile. High above in the branches, he spots a beautiful rainbow-tailored bird and immediately casts appraisal to learn that the avian cooks its own eggs at 95 degrees Celsius. Continuing on, cute hamster creatures scamper beside his feet, making him smile at the scenery. He hops across a series of river stones with flawless balance, listening to his boots crunch on the dry earth as he realizes his trash skill is actually a god-tier traversal cheat. Blushing with quiet contentment in the wild, he reflects on getting kicked out of Alessia Castle, picturing the kind faces of Pops and the tailoress. Looking back at the distant city fortifications, he marches on with a light heart. Suddenly, a leaf drifts by, and he halts in pure shock as he reaches a high ridge overlooking a vast, breathtaking walled town nestled beautifully against the mountains. He stands in absolute awe, whispering about how incredible this world is. Resting beside his massive pack, he remembers the terrifying disorientation of being summoned and the dark depression of his old life. Shaking it off with newfound focus, he shouts his resolve into the wind, swearing to explore every single inch of this fantasy realm. He is perfectly fine being a failed hero if it means finding his own path, letting visions of the adventurers he has met, the fluffy crescent moon creature, the bearded man, the mysterious woman, and even a hooded assassin pass through his mind. With a final, confident step forward, his status menu pings, confirming his walking skill has officially leveled up to level 3. Waking up in his simple cot as the morning sun hits the capital city's towering skyline, Sora Fujimiya snaps awake with the sudden realization that his whole isekai transfer isn't a hallucination. He sits straight up, executing a deep morning stretch to plan his opening strategy before clenching his fist with speedrunner resolve to go find a job. Smash cut to the bustling city market street, where street food aromas drift over the hard cobblestones. Sora pauses amidst the foot mob traffic with his massive backpack until he spots a muscular vendor NPC behind a wooden counter and shouts, "Hey, Pops!" Pops grins over his grill, asking if he wants a skewer, so Sora accepts the meat, explains his job situation, and gets hit with the ultimate question. What can you do? Sora gives a look of pure unbewilderment, as Pops clarifies he means alchemy or potion concocting skills. Staring down at the cobblestones, Sora slumps his shoulders and admits he has zero magic crafts. Pops taps his chin and grins, pointing him toward a place with zero skill requirements, sparking instant hope in Sora's eyes as the vendor promises an endless stream of job offers. Following directions west at the main road, past random locals, Sora arrives before a massive, ornate building adorned with towers and a runic sign. This is like a full-blown RPG, he mutters, watching armored tryhards gather at the door while feeling slightly intimidated. Summoning his focus, he grins with sharp resolve and declares, "Let's go." He pushes the heavy doors open, running straight into a chaotic PvP bar brawl, where a blonde guy yells, "Oh, let's play?" Sora peeks through the door just as a colossal punch hits the blonde guy, sending a shockwave through the room. A bearded meathead roars, "Now you've done it, you bastard!" And the kinetic blast knocks Sora flat onto the hard floor. A beret-wearing receptionist mutters, "You?" right before a mountain of old books tumbles down, burying Sora completely. She panics with apologies and peers over her counter, asking if it's his first time here. Nearby guild members watch him, buried under paper. But Sora's fist bursts through the stack as he gasps out his request to register. The receptionist, Mikaru, bows in apology over the book repairs, but Sora stands up and claims he's fine, explaining his goal until her face brightens. She whips out a white card instructing him to drop blood on it. So Sora slices his finger to form a blood bead that drips onto the card and morphs into magical script. A brilliant flashbang of white light erupts from the counter, leaving his name Sora stamped next to the official royal seal. Rank E? Sora asks in confusion, prompting Makaru to break down the UI color system, where white signifies rank E. She gestures to a wall chart showing the hierarchy, explaining S rank is top tier and E rank is literal bottom tier trash, before pointing toward the massive request wall in the back. It was packed with public requests submitted by local villagers. Moving over to the gargantuan request board inside the chaotic guild hall, Sora tried to look busy while a nearby muscle brain flexed his biceps to intimidate him. The friendly receptionist assured him that the board had plenty of low-stakes, simple tasks. Staring at the overwhelming wall of flyers, Sora remarked on the sheer volume of quests. His eyes darted between herb gathering, hunting dangerous wolves, and finding a lost cat. He immediately nixed the combat options, realizing he didn't even own a weapon, let alone the stats to survive. Suddenly, a rumbling voice called out to him from behind. A terrifying giant of a man wearing a stitched mask and spiral tattoos loomed over him like a final boss. The masked giant mocked him, stating a scrawny twig like Sora would easily get eaten by wolves. Sora began shaking with pure, unadulterated anxiety as the intimidating figure stared him down. The giant growled that Sora was the only one pathetic enough to handle a specific low-level errand. With a sudden movement, the masked giant ripped a delivery request off the board and violently shoved it into Sora's face. Panic mode fully activated, and with his heart hammering against his ribs, Sora frantically began tearing random slips of paper off the board in a desperate bid to escape the terrifying encounter, stammering that he would take all of them. Clutching his randomized loot pool of quests, Sora stood frozen amidst the shouting guild crowd, internally crying that this place was an absolute nightmare. He scurried back to the safety of the reception counter and dumped his chaotic pile in front of Makaru. The receptionist greeted him with a professional smile as she reached for the papers, but her eyes quickly widened as she read the destinations, asking if he was actually going to be okay carrying all that. Sweating bullets? Sora admitted he only took them because he was literally threatened by a masked giant, though he tried to justify it as a way to learn the city's layout. Mikaru gestured to a horrifying mountain of heavy crates and sacks waiting in the dispatch corner, causing Sora's jaw to drop at the ridiculous size of the load. He hoisted the massive cargo onto his back, dragging his feet toward the exit while the receptionist waved him off. Stepping out into the blinding daylight, he adjusted his heavy wooden rack, his muscles screaming in protest. Replaying the terrifying encounter with the masked giant in his head, Sora lamented that he had never had to deal with such scary people back in Japan. Taking a deep breath, he pulled out a parchment map to plan his route, trying to accept that fantasy world logic was entirely different from his old life. Staring at the complex city streets, he felt a crushing wave of doubt about his chances of survival. For a moment, his mind spiraled into a dark void of anxiety, but he quickly shook his head, screamed a defiant "nope" to the empty street, and resolved to just get to work and head toward the commercial guild. Sprinting through the capital districts in full speedrun mode, Sora heaves 5 heavy sacks of flour into the commercial guild warehouse, earning an impressed nod from a worker in a tunic. He shifts into high gear to clear his remaining deliveries, dropping 3 bags of medicinal herbs at the pharmacist's guild for a guy in a coat, handing a package to a basket lady in the timber-framed street, and delivering the final standard parcel to an elderly woman on her doorstep. Walking away, he slurps a freebie ice cream bar gifted by a shopkeeper, marveling at the endless guild types. Checking his stats, Sora realizes he hasn't lost a single point of stamina thanks to his broken walking passive skill. He shouts, "Open status," to pull up his translucent UI screen, revealing he's already hit level 6 with maxed 70 HP, MP, SP, and +1 stat bonuses. With his EXP counter at 5452/6000, he needs just 6,000 steps to reach level 7. He checks his banked skill points, recalling he spent one on appraisal yesterday, and hype trains himself toward the final address on his list. Halting before an ornate high-end mansion, he shouts an intro right as the heavy doors creak open. An absolute top-tier dark-haired beauty named Vanessa steps onto the balcony, looking down with an icy stare to demand what he wants. Sora hands over a letter from a guy named Ray Renova, instantly shattering her cold demeanor. She points down frantically, screaming at him to wait right there before slamming the balcony door like thunder. She bursts out the front door, aggressively signaling him closer, letting Sora present the sign-off doc. She snatches the paper with an intense glare and ducks back inside with another loud door slam. Sora stands on the steps awkwardly, asking for a signature until she cracks the door open to ask if he's reporting back to Rai. She shoves a wax-sealed envelope into his chest, frantically begging him to deliver it. Sora notes the dark seal in fancy handwriting and salutes with a panic-fueled, "Yes, sir!" Walking down a quiet path, Sora wonders what drama is inside until he reaches a rundown wooden shack on the outskirts and calls out. A groggy NPC named Rai, wearing goggles, peeks out, and Sora confirms his identity. Rai slides his goggles up, asking who he is, prompting Sora to bow apologetically. Sora reports Vanessa's delivery is complete, while Rai stands completely frozen and pulls out the reply envelope, declaring it's from Vanessa. Rai's soul leaves his body as he stares at the paper in existential terror. Sora tilts his head in bewilderment as Rai starts sweating, spiraling anime eyes. Rai panics, steam billowing from his brain as he regrets his drunken love letter. Sora's gamer intuition clicks. It was a drunk confession. Rai winces in pure cringe as Sora hands over the reply, and Rai shakily accepts. Rai short-circuits instantly, steam exploding from his head. Sora pumps his fist like a hype man, shouting encouragement as Rai clutches the letter to his chest. Rai gasps that his heart is about to explode and casts a floating magic timer to stall opening it. 10 agonizing minutes tick by until a sharp chime rings out, vibrating so hard a loose wallboard falls off his crumbling house. Rai blushes hard, scanning the lines, while Sora asks how it went. Rai spins around with a massive, goofy grin, declaring it's all good. Sora stares wide-eyed, blushing from pure secondhand relief as Rai signs the quest paper and Sora celebrates the dub. A little spirit halo floats out of Rai's soul, smiling serenely in the air. Quest complete, Sora hikes back to the city, feeling super accomplished about his first delivery run. Back at the grand gates of the Adventurers Guild, Sora stood in the bustling plaza feeling a massive surge of accomplishment. He pushed open the heavy wooden double doors, ready to cash in his hard-earned rewards. Immediately, the chaotic and violent atmosphere of the hall hit him, complete with 3 terrifying, aura-radiating meatheads glaring directly at the entrance. Sora's confidence vanished instantly, and he began sweating bullets, desperately hoping he wouldn't get pulverized. Keeping his head low, he slipped through the rowdy crowd to the reception desk to quickly file his report. He leaned over the counter and hesitantly announced he had completed all his deliveries. Makaru looked up and beamed, thoroughly impressed that he wasn't even slightly winded after carrying such a heavy load. Blushing, Sora scratched his head and credited his weirdly overpowered walking skill. The receptionist leaned in close, dropping her voice to whisper about Rai's infamous letter. Sora confirmed he had delivered it. Leaning even further across the counter, she eagerly asked if he knew how it turned out. Sora smiled brightly, cheerfully revealing that the two were officially going out. Instantly, a deafening silence swept across the entire guild hall as every single brute stopped to stare at him. Sora froze, sweating profusely, and wondering if he had just broken some sacred taboo. Suddenly, the silence exploded into utter chaos as a swarm of rough adventurers lunged at him, causing Sora to scream in terror. He blinked in sheer confusion as the laughing crowd surrounded him. The rowdy adventurers hoisted him high into the air like a hero, cheering his success, while a bewildered Sora flailed his limbs. The entire hall immediately erupted into a massive, alcohol-fueled celebration banquet. Over in the corner, the guild receptionists huddled together, squealing in delight over the gossipy victory. A scarred, beefy brawler with a ponytail threw a heavy arm around Sora's shoulder, offering him a whole roast pig on his tab, while Sora sat there completely overwhelmed. Nearby, a short-haired adventurer chugged a tankard in frustration, complaining that Rai had beaten him to the punch, while another raised a mug in a toast, revealing to Sora that Rai's unrequited crush had actually been the guild's biggest open secret for 27 years. A nostalgic vision of their childhood hung in the air, showing a young Vanessa with a toy sword and a shy, bespectacled Rai watching her. The bearded brawler leaned in, explaining they were celebrating because Rai had been pining after her for nearly 3 decades. Laughing heartily, the giant clapped Sora's back, declaring him a literal Cupid. Sora watched the rough crowd with a growing sense of wonder, a warm blush on his face, as he realized how wholesome these terrifying meatheads actually were. Suddenly, the giant masked man with the spiral tattoos loomed over him again. Sora recoiled in terror, squeaking a nervous greeting, but instead of murdering him, the giant gruffly admitted he was incredibly impressed by Sora's impressive carrying capacity. Sora blinked, asking if the guy hadn't actually been trying to kill him earlier. The masked giant frantically waved his hands in denial. He leaned in, shouting aggressively that he had actually just been worried about Sora's survival. The bearded brawler scolded his giant friend for having such a terrible, hostile way of speaking. Sora finally realized the giant's shrimp comment from earlier was actually just a tsundere attempt to save him from a deadly wolf quest. Looking over the rowdy, brawling crowd, Sora smiled, realizing he had totally misjudged them. A soft grin spread across his face as he accepted that these terrifying brutes were actually incredibly kind-hearted people. Suddenly, the doors burst open as a spiky-haired bro marched in carrying Rai on his shoulder. Ray looked absolutely stunned by the sudden spotlight. The entire guild raised their mugs, roaring a massive congratulations to the man of the hour. Sora let out a soft, contented chuckle. Ray climbed down and pulled out her cherished note, his expression softening as he read it. Sora beamed, offering his genuine congratulations once more. Without warning, the masked giant dumped a massive barrel of grape juice directly into Sora's mouth, while his bearded buddy watched in skeptical concern. Later that night, under the majestic glow of the twin crescent moons, Sora looked up at the beautiful capital city and knew he was absolutely going to love this world. Inside a sun-drenched room at Ollie's Inn, summoned speedrunner Sora snaps awake like an over-caffeinated streamer and screams, "Good morning!" into the empty room. A quick micro-flashback reminds us he spent his first week lore-grinding in the guild library, confusing local scholars while researching booze. Hit up taverns where boisterous locals questioned his social outcast status, and rapidly built up a massive delivery client base. Craving a stat update, he closes his eyes and mentally inputs open status, bringing up a shiny UI panel revealing another level up. His broken passive skill, Walking, is sitting pretty at level 16, giving him free XP per step with 0 stamina drain, alongside 15 unspent skill points and appraisal level 3. Staring at his build options, he tries to calculate whether to expand his utility toolkit from the fresh skill roster of presence detection, body enhancement, and daily life magic. Overwhelmed by RPG choice paralysis while a broom sweeps outside, he groans, "I can't decide." The landlady keeps sweeping the dirt courtyard as Sora storms out the front door, packed for adventure. He announces his grand expedition beyond the city walls, confirming his 4 chosen skills and yelling, "I'm going!" System cards break down his min-max build. Mob radar, stat buffs, daily magic and mana efficiency. Skipping a paid upgrade for appraisal to let it level through passive grinding, he runs to an open field and yells, "Daily life magic, activate." A sudden magical wash cycle strips away a week's worth of filthy sweat, making him gasp in sheer relief. Standing on a high city overlook with panoramic views of castle spires, he stretches his arm upward in victory and screams, "So fresh!" into the crisp morning wind. Sora approaches the front desk, where a beret-wearing receptionist NPC asks, "Are you picking herbs for today?" Sora grins like a starry-eyed beginner, adjusting his massive backpack and replying, "Yes, it's the first time I've received a request to go out of town." To which she smiles, hands over the request parchment, and says, "Please do your best," prompting a energetic "Hi" from our boy. However, she notices his total lack of defense and hesitates, asking, "The gathering place is outside the city, but is your equipment okay?" Sora instantly starts sweating, stuttering through his gamer research excuses. "I just saw it in the reference room yesterday, Right on cue, a spiked-haired Chad named Siphon interrupts, warning him there are a lot of deep forests outside the city, and the fact that it says that monsters like wolves and goblins will appear means that proper equipment is necessary. Sora defensively protests, "I'm thinking of buying this," making Siphon scoff. "What? Your equipment isn't ready, Sora?" Sora gasps, "Siphon-san!" But the high-level warrior tells him to ditch the formal talk and offers to guide him to a local armory, warning that the shopkeeper is a bit grumpy. Arriving at the stone armory, Siphon pushes the door open and shouts, "Yo, owner-san!" revealing a pipe-puffing boomer owner surrounded by high-level gear. Siphon throws Sora under the bus, snitching, "This guy's going out of town, but didn't have any equipment ready." The owner narrows his eyes and grunts. "So, what can you do?" Causing Sora to point at a blade and bashfully admit, "It's not like I can, but I was wondering if having a sword would be cool." The owner orders him, "Swing that sword over there," making Sora jump with a nervous, "Yes." Sora picks up a light blade, remarking, "It's quite thin and small. This is the first time I'm holding an actual sword. It's unexpectedly heavy." As he strains just to hold it straight, the owner takes a smoke break, sizing up the kid, before bluntly declaring, "So you're just an amateur?" He scoffs that weaklings shouldn't leave the safe zone without a high-level bodyguard, before pulling out the ultimate insult, a tiny butter knife. The owner slaps it down, stating, "This is," making Sora groan, "a small knife?" To which the owner barks, "Don't joke around. This is only for emergencies." Siphon tries to console him, saying everyone starts from scratch, which triggers Sora's ultimate gamer logic. Why spend months training when you have skill points? Realizing he has swordsmanship sitting in his unlockable skill tree, Sora gets a sudden surge of resolve, shouting, "Right!" He taps the holographic prompt asking to spend 1 point on swordsmanship, then points at a mounted blade and asks, "Can I try holding this sword?" The owner scoffs, "Idiot! You think you can use that sword? I don't care even if you buy it, but with your skill, you won't be able to use it." But the instant Sora grips the hilt, the cheat skill kicks in. He swings in a terrifying upward arc, executing a lightning-fast flurry of sword afterimages that slice through the air with a whistling screech. Sora stares at his hands in shock, leaving Siphon frozen in complete disbelief and forcing the owner to drop his pipe in awe. Flustered, Sora asks, "How was that just now?" before flashing his cash. "I want armor too. My budget is 1 gold coin. Recognizing a pay-to-win prodigy, the owner grunts, "Wait here," and heads to the back, while Siphon bursts into boisterous laughter over the owner's dramatic shift in respect. The owner returns with a heavy bundle, slamming down a set of high-grade gear. Right on the shop's wooden counter, the store owner unrolls a full kit of high-tier gear, custom-tailored for Sora's squishy frame. Siphon screams in pure envy upon spotting an ultra-rare blade straight from the Holy Kingdom. While Sora gazes at the loot with starstruck eyes, the old man admits the sword's quality is top-notch and tells the brat to stop fooling around. Blushing bright red, Sora yells, "Yes!" and gears up for the wilderness. Stepping back outside, Sora strikes a confident pose, thanks Siphon for the carry, and watches his ally leave to train. He takes a deep, steadying breath and marches up to the giant royal capital gate, gripping his backpack straps and shouting, "Wilderness, here I go!" An armored guard steps up to demand his adventurer ID. Swallowing his nerves, Sora pulls out his card like a seasoned pro. The guard scrutinizes the parchment before casually handing it back with an "okay." Sora stammers out a flustered thank you as his cool guy persona crumbles. The guard warns him not to get eaten by monsters while gathering herbs, and roars, "Open the gates!" to the gatekeepers. The massive iron portcullis lifts with a bone-rattling grind. Sora whispers, "I'm finally going outside," as excitement takes over. A fresh breeze hits his face as the open plains unlock before his eyes, launching his open-world speedrun. Freshly spawned outside the giant iron gates, Sora draws a deep breath as the crisp open-air breeze hits his face. He admires his starter gear and the heavy sword at his hip, while his boots crunch through soft grass, instantly breaking into a hyperactive full sprint up a hill, while reminding himself this is a real-world speedrun, cresting the plateau to gawk at a ridiculously dramatic mountain skyline. He flashes a wide grin and blushes from pure hype. Smash cut to his stamina bar immediately hitting 0. He slumps onto the turf, panting like a dog, realizing his stamina skill doesn't buff running. Recomposing himself, he whips out his quest map to plot the route toward the breeding grounds, knowing these medical herbs are mandatory crafting ingredients. He dives into the dense woods, hyped out of his mind, because actual fetch quests beat boring delivery jobs any day, until he stares down at a confusing carpet of identical weeds. Realizing he has cheat code utility magic, he yells out to activate appraisal. Boom! Translucent status windows flood his vision, assigning quality grades to everything from trash plants to mana grass. Picking a high-tier sprig, he beams at the full stat readout and decides to min-max his inventory by strictly picking top-shelf ingredients. Cue a speedrun montage of him vacuuming up full moon weed until an hour vanishes in a blur. He flops down on a massive sack of loot, rubbing his aching back and sore legs, right as digital notifications pop up to announce his appraisal and body enhancement skills leveled up. He flexes a modest smile, opening his status UI to see walking hit level 16, despite his job still being hard-coded as jobless. The peaceful grind is shattered by a loud rustle in the brush. Sora snaps his head over in a panic, recalling the guard's beast warning and realizing he forgot to toggle presence detection on. Leather creaks as his hand grips his hilt and draws the blade, staring into dark silhouettes to see what nightmare approaches. Instead, out rolls a round, ridiculous ball of white fluff. The creature sits peacefully, blinking up at him with innocent eyes, leaving him bewildered. What is this? His tactical paranoia melts into a deep blush and shimmering eyes. Absolutely cute thingy? The mascot's stomach lets out a loud growl, prompting Sora to ask, "Hey, could it be you're hungry?" Kneeling down, Sora rummages through his backpack. He pulls out 2 black, rectangular blocks of ration food. He offers them to the fluff ball. "Here, you want some?" In a blurred flash of motion, the creature leaps forward and swallows the block in a single gulp, making Sora shout, "He just ate it whole!" Sora watches with an affectionate smile as it chews, thinking, it looks so cute while chewing. Then, The creature's expression goes completely blank. Its whole body vibrates violently from intense strain. It collapses flat on the ground, looking utterly devastated by the toxic taste. Sora sits beside it, concerned, asking, "Oh, sorry it wasn't tasty for you?" Taking a small bite himself, his face contorts in pure disgust. Ew, it's awful. Feeling immensely guilty, Sora bows his head toward the flattened puffball, stammering, "Sorry, I didn't think it would taste this terrible." To his surprise, the creature begins floating weightlessly in the air, making Sora gasp, "You can fly?" The creature zips around him in playful loops to comfort him, leading Sora to ask, "Are you trying to say it's all right?" "Thank you." The creature descends and nestles right on top of Sora's head. It sits contentedly while Sora blinks, feeling the soft weight in his hair. Sora looks up with a hopeful smile and asks, "Do you want to come along?" To which the creature nods vigorously. So cute, Sora thinks, his face flushing with adoration. Standing up with renewed energy, he shouts toward the trees, "Okay, then let's go." The creature's eyes sparkle with happiness as it perches on his scalp. Sora introduces himself, saying, "I'm Sora. I hope we can..." But he stops mid-sentence as a sharp sensory alarm triggers in his mind when presence detection finally activates, revealing a sudden looming threat. Terrified by the spike in radar aggro, Sora gasps, "What is this presence?" Deeper in the dense forest clearing, Sora's mind suddenly shifts into a sensory void as his radar skill takes over, visualizing nearby life as pulsing bursts of light in an abstract dark space that reveals 6 hostile presences rapidly closing in from the south. Back in physical reality, Sora stands paralyzed as aggressive speed lines and sensory sparks fill his vision, sweating as he thinks they are coming, while his survival instincts scream at him to pull an immediate tactical retreat. But before he can run, a vicious pack of wolf monsters bursts through the foliage, and one massive beast leaps through the air with wide-open jaws, targeting him, while in the background, a blonde female warrior in full plate armor desperately swings dual swords to keep the rest of the mob at bay. The 2 female adventurers are cornered on the forest floor, completely surrounded by the lunging monsters as the blonde knight holds her sword high in a defensive stance, while behind her, a girl in a hooded cloak clutches a magic staff with a face of sheer terror. The blonde warrior grits her teeth with fierce main character determination to protect her squishy companion, despite overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, the hooded mage trembles violently, drenched in sweat as her wide eyes stay locked on the approaching fangs. Watching the generic fantasy rescue setup unfold, Sora's face contorts in total shock as he thinks, 2 girls? Before shouting, "Are being attacked by wolves?" Deep in the monster-infested woods, a giant alpha wolf unleashes a blood-curdling roar, while Meat Shield Waifu blocks a crushing downward pounce with her blade, as she and her squishy caster stand back-to-back in the middle of a literal wolf-pocalypse. Hiding in the bushes like a total coward, Sora Fujimiya gawks at the chaos, instantly spotting their battered armor and zeroed-out stamina bars. "Stay back, Chris." Meat Shield screams as she dual-wields her way into a desperate defensive wall, barely parrying another leaping aggro grab, while the exhausted hooded mage wilts behind her. Sora suddenly remembers a quick mob entry from a guild library guide, describing these beasties as high-speed DPS nightmares. Watching the frontliners swing blindly across the cracked dirt to keep their HP above 0, while sweating bullets because their low-level team synergy is totally doomed against this mob density. Squishy Caster clutches her staff for dear life behind the tanking warrior, forcing Sora to calculate the mathematically inevitable total party wipe as he hesitates on the clearing's edge, observing the relentless aggro circle. His 15-year PvP dry spell hits him like a truck as he whimpers about dying. But his instincts kick in anyway as his hand tightens around his own hilt. Smash cut to the combat zone. A wolf slams into Meat Shield's X-block, shattering her guard and sending her staggering, right as the entire pack launches a simultaneous all-out raid boss wipe under the cloudy sky. Meat Shield's face melts into pure horror, her wide eyes reflecting total doom, as three massive beasts jump her at once. Caster panics while Meat Shield screams in horror, and Caster's pupils dilate in absolute terror. "Oh no! They are in danger!" Sora yells as his main character heart glow ignites, and boom! A random blade flies through the air, impaling a lunging wolf straight through its maw and dumping it into the dirt. Sora stares at his hands in complete shock, while Meat Shield pauses in total confusion, and Caster suddenly locks in, gripping her staff like a pro, while the impaled wolf flies backward in a glorious geyser of blood. "Did I?" Caster stammers, convinced she somehow triggered a high-level kill shot, while Meat Shield refocuses on the remaining mob. The warrior swings a frantic wide arc, but a rogue wolf slips right past her aggro zone, charging straight into the foreground. "Damn it! I let one slip past me," she shrieks, turning Sora into the target of a high-speed furry missile. The beast closes in with bared fangs, reflecting right in Sora's wide, terrified eye as he freezes up in a cold sweat. Suddenly, he spots a dropped sword lying on the dirt, dives low under the lunging beast, and reaches wildly for the hilt, while the wolf lets out a deafening roar right above his head. Eyes squeezed shut in pure survival panic, he exerts every ounce of muscle. And seconds later, the monster lies stone dead, with a blade buried in its spine, while Sora kneels beside it, totally spent. Dark blood coats his hand and hilt, and he pants like a broken engine, before closing his eyes in pure relief. "I won. I was able to help," he celebrates internally, remaining totally still in his silent victory moment, with sweat dripping down his trembling face. Out of nowhere, the two waifus come sprinting through the foliage toward him while he gasps on the cracked earth. They skid to a halt, and Meat Shield beams, extending a gloved hand. "I was only able to defeat those wolves with the opening you created. Thanks," while Caster chimes in with a quiet, "We really appreciate the help." Sora just stares up in total bewildered confusion before Meat Shield grabs his hand and yanks him to his feet, shaking it violently while Caster stands by, looking completely unbothered. "I am Rurika. Nice to meet you," Meat Shield beams, followed by a curt, "I'm Chris," leaving Sora to awkwardly stammer out, My name is Sora," under Chris's intensely suspicious gaze. But before he can celebrate surviving the encounter, Rurika gestures to the bloody corpses littered around them and drops the real bomb. "Okay, Sora, let's get to dismantling these wolves while they are still fresh." Sora's face instantly turns to stone, eyes trembling in utter horror as he shrieks to the heavens, "Dismantling?" We open on the gruesome, silent, bloody graveyard known as the wolf hunting field, where dead monster bodies are casually littered across the grass, alongside a giant beast pinned to the dirt by a sword thrust. Our poor, accidental murder hobo protagonist, Sora Fujimiya, stands totally paralyzed in full shock, looking like an anime lead who just realized his pristine white cloak is now completely ruined by dark crimson splatter. Right on cue, the overly energetic dagger wielder Lulika cheerfully winks while brandishing her oversized skinning knife like a seasoned pro, while the quiet mage Chris stands by with the ultimate deadpan look. Look, becoming a legendary hero is basically an unglamorous grind set, even if these girls will eventually end up cuddling against a giant rock wall for a quick nap later on, though. But right now, they are a million miles away from the cozy dirt path they were chilling on earlier today. Suddenly, a horrifying sound echoes as Lulika brutally stabs her blade straight into flesh. With absolute zero chill, she carves up the monster carcass with a razor-sharp slice. Meanwhile, Sora literally collapses to his knees, clutching his stomach in sheer visceral terror, while Lulika pops the classic oblivious question, asking if he's doing all right. Clinging to his mouth to keep from hurling his guts out, Sora stammers an apology and confesses this is literally his first day on the job. Lulika practically loses her mind, yelling, "First time?" in disbelief that this absolute casual somehow soloed two high-level wolves, while Chris watches in silent awe. Sora humbly plays the modest card, rubbing his chin and claiming it was pure RNG luck. But inside his head, he's staring at his own trembling, blood-soaked hands and spiraling because he just took a living creature's life. But then, because fantasy rules are completely unhinged, Sora's eyes go dark as a disturbing manic smirk creeps onto his face while he lets out a crazy laugh. He instantly snaps out of his edgelord trance with a bewildered, "Huh?" staring into the void with dilated pupils and a weird gamer blush on his cheeks. He starts wondering what kind of sick adrenaline rush he just experienced. Panting like a guy who just pulled off an impossible speedrun strat, he realizes his body threw that sword on pure instinct before his brain could even process it. He vividly remembers his blade impaling the beast's chest, leaving him staring into space in utter existential dread, while muttering that this dark, violent high isn't like him at all. Interrupting his internal monologue before he goes full villain arc, Lulika snaps him back to reality by shouting his name. She hypes up the post-fight tutorial with a confident smile, reminding him that monster guts equal massive gold coins. Beside her, a flustered Chris finishes her own dirty work with a quiet, "I did mine," before letting out a high-pitched, "Wait!" Lulika kindly tells the exhausted, mana-drained mage to take a bench break. Kneeling over a dead wolf, she drops classic beginner quest tutorial exposition about how skinning carcasses is mandatory for survival. Sora clenches his fist with sudden anime protagonist resolve, roaring "right" as he accepts his grim fate. Shift over to the butcher station in the grassy glade, where Sora takes a deep breath while Lulika demonstrates how to yank out internal organs so the meat doesn't spoil like bad milk. As she chops away, Sora gets the lore drop on his party members. They're a D-rank duo who wandered into these woods on a side quest for killer bee honey. Naturally, the quest went horribly sideways when they stumbled near a giant bee nest and got ambushed by an entire wolf pack. Chris had to burn her entire mana bar, casting a confusion crowd control spell so they could kill 4 beasts and escape, leaving her completely drained. Lulika lets out a heavy sigh over the wasted trip. Slicing through heavy hides side by side with Sora, she whines, "I wonder if our honey request is ruined." But as Sora's battle adrenaline fades, his primal male brain realizes Lulika's low-tier armor leaves way too much skin exposed for a teenage girl. Catching him red-handed, Lulika tilts her head and asks, "What are you looking at?" Sora panics like a classic rom-com protagonist, waving his arms violently and screaming, "Not a thing!" To make matters infinitely more awkward, Chris creeps up right into his personal space, staring into his soul. The deadpan mage asks, "Something wrong?" causing Sora to break into a massive cold sweat. Stammering out a broken, no, he furiously stabs into the wolf hide while chanting mental mantras to ignore the horrific gore. Lulika then plunges her arm deep into the carcass and pulls out a dripping, slimy organ, announcing, The magic stone is in this organ, next to the heart. It's worth a lot of money. Sora's stomach instantly does backflips at the disgusting squelch sound. Looking like he's about to turn inside out, both girls ask if he's going to throw up. When the crafting session finally ends, the contrast is hilarious. Lulika has pristine prime cuts, while Sora's loot pile looks like shredded trash. Sora slumps into total self-loathing, whimpering, "I am trash." Though Lulika tries to comfort the scrub. Standing up, Lulika wipes her brow and announces it's time to bag up the loot. Sora looks at their blood-soaked outfits and asks the girls to wait a moment. Closing his eyes like a budget wizard, he casts his secret spell. Cleaning magic, activate. A literal swirling vortex of water magic erupts around them. The rushing water spins around the trio, instantly power washing every drop of blood and grime off their skin and gear. Both girls stand frozen in utter shock with their jaws hitting the floor. The forest sparkles like a shiny gotcha pole as Sora grins, "Done, all clean," while the girls shower him with praise. Lulika gasps, "Wow, Sora, you can use cleaning magic?" While Chris notes that utility magic is ultra rare, feeling a wave of paranoia, Sora touches his chin and realizes his everyday QOL life magic is actually super OP in this world, resolving to hide his broken skill tree from the public. Out on the sunlit forest trail, the encumbered inventory phase begins, as Sora kneels beside a colossal white cloth bundle. He cranks the rope knots tight to optimize the haul. Lulika casts doubt on his carry capacity, but Sora hits her with peak protagonist optimism. "As long as it's luggage, I'm strong enough." He pops his broken walking passive skill, easily hoisting a pack 3 times his size, while Lulika cracks jokes and he leads the charge back to the royal capital. Boots crunching, pack creaking, Sora maintains a flawless, steady speedrun pace. Suddenly, Ciel, the fluffy spirit, glides through the foliage nearby. Sora stops dead, whipping his head toward the bushes, but the brush goes dead silent and empty. Blinking in confusion, he mutters, "I guess it's probably gone." He sighs, readjusts his giant loot pack, and turns back to the path. Whip pan to the mountain pass. The glittering royal capital looms in the distance. Lulika points to the horizon, Chris clutches her staff, and Sora relaxes, knowing this wild first quest was an absolute, unmitigated W. Inside the noisy, high-ceilinged Adventurers Guild Hall, the trio stands before the counter as the local beret girl warmly greets Rurika and Chris. Notice the new guy? Rurika instantly explains they teamed up on the road. Sora doesn't talk. He just slams a massive, counter-groaning bag of wolf meat onto the wood, like an absolute loot goblin. Beret girl loses her mind over the haul and offers free garbage disposal for bad cuts, leaving Sora sweating at her unhinged NPC energy. Cue the awkward silence while Rurika gives him suspicious side-eye. Bam! Sora drops another massive burlap sack of medical herbs on the counter, staring blankly while the narrator reminds us there are mechanics he still doesn't understand. Trade finalized. Buying complete. Then Beret Girl drops the hammer. What happened to the Killer Bee quest? Rurika hangs her head in shame over the failed objective, and Chris admits high-level mutant wolves blocked the zone. Instantly, the background NPC mob starts hyperventilating, making Sora feel the uncomfortable shift in lobby aggro. Heavy combat boots echo down the floor. Boom! The Monocle Guildmaster marches in, demanding to know if monsters are invading. Sora's party freezes in shock as Monocle Boomer screams that beginner zone spawns are completely broken, calling an emergency B-rank summit right then and there. The entire lobby goes dead silent. He orders Beret Girl to ping the royal castle, then throws a sinister "watch your back outside" warning at Sora's group. Smash cut to the cobblestone streets as the guild gates slam shut behind them. Chris and Rurika digest the massive main quest flag, while Sora just shrugs it off. Blonde Chris bounces back instantly, stoked about the meat sale payout. Sora tries to waive his 50% split out of sheer imposter syndrome, but Chris shuts that down and invites him to dinner instead. A restaurant that cooks your own monster drops? Sora's foodie brain activates instantly. I'm in! They split up to drop off gear, agreeing to regroup at dusk. As they walk away, Chris catches Twin Tails acting super stiff and whispers a top-secret romance tease into her ear, causing Twin Tails to suffer a total thermal shutdown. She panic sprints down the street, with blonde Chris giving chase. Sora watches the rom-com chaos unfold from afar, cluelessly assuming they're just super close party members. He opens his mid-E rank UI status window with a sigh, quickly micro-flashbacking to a dream scenario where he's the ultimate Giga Chad carry, flanked by high-tier SSR party members. Reality hits, leaving him looking like a lonely sad sack. Time to cope. He adjusts his massive loot pack and bolts back to the inn. Later that night, the party reconvenes at a multi-story building, proudly displaying a massive restaurant sign, where Sora sits at a wooden dining table with his jaw on the floor, staring at an absurd feast crafted entirely from his salvaged wolf cuts. Chris proudly flexes that the chef here is a top-tier culinary NPC, while Rurika casually mentions they frequent the spot. Chris watches him with a mischievous, cat-like glint in her eyes, while Rurika offers a mildly annoyed side-eye, complete with a sweat drop. Sora sits frozen, with a fork full of meat halfway to his mouth under Rurika's judging glare, before taking a bite and nearly exploding from the flavor, barely stopping himself from blabbering like a dramatic TV food critic. Chris smiles warmly at his gushing reaction and asks if he's never been here before, leaning in with classic RPG curiosity to question if he's an out-of-towner, while he happily chews. Sora hits her with the standard mysterious protagonist dodge, holding up his fork and claiming he's from a distant land whose name wouldn't mean anything to them. Rurika leans forward, pressing him on why he bothered registering as a low-level adventurer in the first place. Sora gets visibly flustered, muttering about a complicated past to avoid admitting he was basically dragged into this fantasy world. But then his face breaks into a broad, genuine smile as he admits his real dream, to explore this whole massive world on his own 2 feet, for as far as they'll carry him. The two girls freeze, staring at him with wide, surprised eyes as his wholesome, unpretentious grind set completely catches them off guard. Chris's expression softens into a genuine smile as she agrees it's a wonderful dream, leaning closer to drop her pitch. She explains that they're fellow travelers who plan on camping out in the capital for a while, with Rurika nodding in agreement. Rurika clarifies that it's just a temporary pit stop, looking surprisingly content. The two women share a warm, knowing glance as the social vibe reaches peak cozy. Then, in absolute perfect unison, both girls lean across the table with terrifying intensity and ask if he wants to join their party. Sora completely freezes, mouth agape with meat still dangling from his fork, panicking internally as his brain tries to process these two cute adventurers actually recruiting a rank E trash tier stat player. Outside, the restaurant glows under a starry nighttime sky, leaving the audience hanging on a massive cliffhanger as to whether our boy Sora will accept the invite or let his imposter syndrome win.
The video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Like the video if you're ready for the next part.